following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in. This is Josh Mahler with Belly Up Sports. I am the host of Rising to the Occasion. We're very excited to get on here last minute and start up a little show where we're going to talk about the playoff selection and kind of give you our reaction to it. There's been a lot of buzz, as there usually always is, just about every year with the playoff selection and how they choose these top four teams, who really deserves to be in, who doesn't. And we're going to talk about all of that and much more today. I'm going to go ahead and bring in my two co-hosts for the evening. Very excited to have both of them on. First, I got Jay from Unfair Sports. Jay, how you doing, man?
Doing all right, Josh, man. Thanks for having me as usual. Let's talk about what the committee done did to us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I've also got Vince over here from Stove Sports, right?
Sports Stove, yes.
Sports Stove. Okay, I knew I was going to mess it up one way or the other, but yeah, I mean, it's. I'm very happy to have you guys on to talk about this with me because it was just kind of a last minute thing. Hey, let's jump on and let's talk about this because all of a sudden in our belly up chat, it was going crazy as soon as the selection was put out there and for everybody out there. And so I was having to go through and read everybody's comments. And I know we had some guys that were just absolutely upset with it, 100%. Some guys were 50-50 on it. And honestly, for me, I'm just in the boat where I don't know what the right move would be. And what I say every year that we have it come down to this is, it comes down to, we have to pick four teams when there's really six teams that deserve it. And I think just about every year that's been the case. Next year we go to a 12-team playoff, and I feel like 12 is too much. 8 is like my middle ground. And so that's kind of where I stand right now. I guess for those who haven't been paying attention, maybe you're living under a rock or you're just too big of an NFL fan to really pay attention to the college football standings. We've got Michigan starting us off at number 1, and then it goes down to Washington at number 2. The two that everyone pretty much expected, that was locked in. That's exactly how it was going to be. And the two teams that absolutely deserve those two spots, that number 1 and 2, absolutely goes to Michigan and Washington. And I don't think anyone would even argue outside of that order. Would you guys? Yeah, I mean,
no, I think it's pretty consistent.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was a pretty good, solid order, putting Michigan at number 1 because of Georgia losing to Alabama, and we all kind of predicted this. I think with Alabama Alabama winning and beating Georgia, that's what started the chaos. And as soon as that happened, I know my brother and I were texting about that game, and as soon as Alabama finally secured it there, I said, well, chaos is about to happen because that's going to kind of jumble everything around. And then on number 3 and 4, we've got Texas and then Alabama, which I like the fact that those two teams are in it. I think they deserve to be in there. But now we're leaving out the 2-time reigning national champ who really has secured that number 1 spot for most of the season. And then you're also leaving out an undefeated 13-0 Florida State team who had to fight and keep themselves alive even with a third-string quarterback yesterday. Vince, we'll start off with you, man. I mean, how are you feeling about this top 4 and really top 6 overall and how the playoff committee did this? Do you think they got it right? Do you think they got it wrong?
No, I think they got it wrong. I look at it, you have to have the argument of, is it the best 4 teams or the most deserving 4 teams? And at the end of the day, I think it should be the most deserving 4 teams. And I mean, if you're one of the best 4 teams, you had to do your business during the season. And at the end of the day, Florida State is undefeated. They're a Power 5 conference champion, and they get left out of the playoffs because of an injury. I mean, to me, that's just not fair. You can't say one guy is the difference for an undefeated team. They went undefeated. They did what they were supposed to do. There's nothing else they could have done other than scored more points in the final game to make the playoffs, and that's not fair. Undefeated Power 5 to get left out. It's one thing if all Power 5 conferences had undefeated champions, but they didn't. Florida State deserves to be in. They've earned the right to be in. And at the end of the day, I mean, I get Alabama's a great program and historic and really good football team. I understand, I get it, and Texas is the same way. I just think Florida State did everything that they were supposed to do, and now you're punishing the rest of the team, the other 80 or whatever 100 guys that are left on the team because their quarterback's injured. I just hate it. I hate it for Florida State. I'm not a Florida State fan. I will admit, as a kid, I was a huge Charlie Ward fan. I was all in on the Seminoles back in the day. But to me, if you go undefeated, win a Power 5 conference, or next year a Power 4 conference, there should be no question that you're in the playoffs. And I think it's wrong how they do it with the injury situation. And I mean, I hate Alabama, so count me out on it.
I think there is a little bit of a difference too when you talk about, like in past years, strength of schedule meaning something. And I can understand that. Like this year, for example, I don't think any of us are arguing that Liberty needs to be up there. In fact, I was a little surprised to see Jay and I were actually exchanging comments on Twitter to find out that Liberty actually gets the bowl that I was kind of hoping we were in, if I saw that right. And so, Liberty, or I guess Liberty being in the New Year's Six Bowl, not the bowl that I was expecting to be in, but they're in the New Year's Six Bowl and Oklahoma's not. That was kind of a little bit of a shock to me. But and then I think Ole Miss was another one that I thought, yeah, I guess, but I just don't think Ole Miss is all that. And then I also think you have to kind of go based off of your overall rankings in your conference and things outside of that. But, we wouldn't be arguing for Liberty to be in the top 4 just because they're undefeated. But Florida State, a Power 5, and I know that doesn't mean anything after this year, but this year it does mean something. You're in a Power 5 conference. You didn't just beat Florida, or you didn't beat LSU. You whomped LSU, and you completely killed them in the first game of the season. Going on from that, Clemson, yeah, they had a down year, but let's not sit here and pretend like Clemson's not a good team and a tough team to beat. So I'm kind of right there with you. I understand that. And honestly, I'll jump over to the comments because I see Kevin Wilson kind of jumping in there, and he said it pretty well. He says that the issue is the committee's inconsistency. Sometimes they go most deserving. An example, Cincinnati or Washington back in 2016. Sometimes they go best. This year they went with best. Yeah, Florida State deserved it. And then he goes on to say, but they're getting waxed by any other team in the college football with a QB who goes 8 for 21 and 55 yards against Louisville. The committee actually has their rules that a player being out will influence it. Yeah, and I get that. And I think that shows something even more, and especially to their defense. And I've said that on our show. I think their defense is why I think they deserve it. But do I think they're one of the 4 best teams? And that's kind of where I don't like. I kind of like how you brought that up, Vince. I don't like that because now we're just assuming as if Florida State isn't one of the 4 best teams. And I honestly really hope they beat Georgia in their bowl game just to prove that maybe they were one of those 4 best teams. But Jay, how are we feeling about the playoff committee's selection here?
So I'll be honest. I think they got it right. And because I think it is the 4 best teams. The bigger thing here is you got to put the teams out there that's going to give us some good football. But at the same time, the one place where I do think they were wrong, though, Florida State should have been in there. And I think Florida State should have been in there because if you're able to go undefeated, regardless if you're starting quarterbacks back, here's the other thing. And with that, Rudemaker, he's going to be back for the bowl game. He was just out for the conference championship. So the conference championship game, of course, wasn't a blowout because they had their 3rd string freshman out there. But Rudemaker's playing in the next game. Yeah. So we actually don't get to see the backup quarterback. And they basically discount them like, oh, well, they didn't blow out Louisville. So even though they held them to 6 points and the defense basically won that game, we don't know what they look like with Rudemaker. It's like, but he'll be there next game. So they kind of should have given them the opportunity to go out there and get boat raced by somebody. But at the same time, I had it predicted that if Alabama was able to beat Georgia, that Bama was going to have to be in there because they beat them. They beat them for the conference championship. But then you got to put Texas in too because Texas beat Alabama 2nd week of the season, but they beat them at Tuscaloosa by 10 points. You kind of got to give them that, right? If we don't count those games at the beginning of the season, then what's the point of scheduling non-conference games that matter? Because at that point, you're just telling me it doesn't matter. The committee basically told me 3 things, and I tweeted this out, that if you lose early in the season, because losses in the early season don't actually count or matter in most capacities, you better run up the score on everybody. Don't allow close games because it seems like that, that scoring margin does matter too, because Florida State won their games. They went undefeated and didn't matter. And so winning out doesn't matter if attrition hits you. If you lose a key player in their eyes, you're out. And it's funny because I think it's only quarterback. If you lose a quarterback, then everybody loses their minds. That's basically when you're out. If it's any other position, if they lost Jared Verse, will we be feeling the same way about Florida State? He's a key component of that defensive line. He's going to be a top 10 draft pick. He was a top 10 draft pick last year. We lose him, then what? So overall, it's basically, to me, I think they did get it right overall. They picked the best teams out there. I do think Florida State may have been favored against Texas if they were going to play matchup against each other, even with Rodemaker as their backup. I just think their defense is that good. But they most likely wouldn't have. They probably wouldn't have given them that. I feel like they should be because I like their defense. But I'm just ready to see how this Washington-Texas game goes down, as well as this Michigan-Alabama game. Now we're going to get to see, is Michigan legit? I mean, they lost last year to TCU. Now we get to see if they're legitimate against an Alabama team that's done nothing but got better this entire season. And Texas keeps claiming that they've gotten better all year long as well. And so has Washington. And they played each other last year in the bowl game, and Washington won 27-20. Now we get to see if it's going to be the same thing this year, right? Is Washington gotten as good as Texas has? We'll get to see that. And then so your question about Liberty got in because the highest ranked G5 team always gets one at large.
Yeah.
That is the only one that's a guarantee. I don't know how Liberty got it, though, because SMU had a much tougher schedule, and they're a much better team. I mean, Liberty had the 133rd ranked strength of schedule this year out of 133 teams. That makes no sense to me that they deserve to get into that game. They put them one game above, and the committee couldn't even give you a real reason.
That's why we bring Jay on, because he's going to. That's why we bring Jay on, because he's going to give us these weird stats that we wouldn't have even known if we tried searching for them. But man, I love it. And my apologies too. I just saw Kev, so I was assuming Kevin Wilson. That was Kev from Tailgate on the Quad that made that comment. And then I also see Around the Table Sports comes in and says, in fairness, Jay, Tate looked a little suspect against an awful Florida team. And then he also says that was also a Florida defense that was able to gain. So I will combat that with, yes, but how did that defense look whenever they shut down that Florida team in the fourth quarter completely, and the offense responded to that defense standing up with another 10 points unanswered? And so I look at this Florida State team, and it's much like how you look in the NFL right now, and I think the reason why the Eagles are number one, regardless of how close their games have been, is because they just find ways to win. And that's the same thing in college football. I don't really care. The same reason why I think TCU did belong in the college football playoff last year is because they found ways to win. And I also don't like the argument that there was just no one else to put in it last year, because that's not true. We threw in an Ohio State team who didn't even make their conference championship game last year. So there were other teams to be thrown in there. And so I think overall you take a look at it, and just how you win doesn't always matter. Just the fact that you're winning. And I think the fact that that Florida State defense is so strong, that's why I think there really is 6 teams that are the 6 best teams and 6 most deserving teams. Did you have something, Jay?
Yeah, and I know Around the Table, that's my boy Ty, great content creator, fantastic stuff, and he's one of the smartest dudes I know when it comes to it as well. My argument though with him is yes, Tate may have looked sus against an awful Florida team. It's also a rivalry game. We all know how those go. Heck, Alabama won on 4th and 31 against Auburn. So and we know Auburn is trash. They lost to a 4-letter acronym school, which you always tote as something to really clown another team for. So my thing is, that was a rivalry game. That was the only reason why I'm like, okay, Tate, I'll give you a pass. You're in a very hostile environment against a team that hates your guts, that plays you like this just their Super Bowl. I'll give you that. I want to see what it looks like in the next game. But unfortunately, he was hurt, so he didn't get to play against Louisville. And so they were trying to figure out the offense with their third-string guy who's young, still trying to learn the game of college football. And he's not, Rudemaker's not one of those, not Rudemaker, the Glenn is not one of those guys that is a super highly touted recruit like that, right? He wasn't going to be one to just lead them on his own. So I think that Tate would have been fine if he had, more time to prep, as we know that Jordan Travis was really the team. It's kind of like Jaden Daniels was at LSU.
Absolutely.
So that's my argument that I would push back with you on, Ty, is really over there around the table is that's, I get what you're saying, but it's a rivalry game. I give grace only in those games because they hate each other's guts.
Yeah,
kind of the tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the same. We could sit there here and make the argument that Alabama's not that good. They struggled against a 6-5 Auburn team, who, again, like you said, is not that good this year. Vince, did you have something?
Yeah, football is the most team sport. I mean, basketball, you got one guy, LeBron makes a difference, right? I mean, football, yes, the quarterback's important. Yes, it's the people we pay the most money to. I get all that, but you got 22, 21 other guys out there on the field that make a difference on the field. And without them, you don't win games. You can have a great quarterback, but if you don't have an O-line, it doesn't matter. That's the way it works. Florida State was a team, and they won as a team. Their record is 13-0 as a team. And, Tate came in 56 total attempts all season long, 5 touchdowns, 0 picks. It doesn't matter if the team didn't blow out Florida. My goodness, they won. And you mentioned that earlier, Josh. The NFL has it right in that sense. It's just, to me, it's so frustrating. I'm a high school basketball coach, and if I had to put up with a committee keeping me out of a postseason tournament because they didn't like the way that we played, I would be irate. And I hate it for the kids, man. I spend all this time with college athletes, having them on my show every week, and I've become very, very attached to that college athlete and the mindset of, man, this is their chance. This is their opportunity. And they have a limited number of opportunities. And, man, to do this to Florida State, it's not just to keep a school out or a conference out. It is wrecking these kids, man. And I know they're young men, but still, this is a horrible way. Jordan Travis, his tweet about, I wish I would have gotten injured earlier in the season so you guys could have seen how good this team was. It just breaks my heart.
Well, and how many people were betting against? I was looking at the odds yesterday because I was starting to be on the fence. Like, man, and we talked about this on our live show yesterday. I don't really know which way to swing now because all of the money is going towards Louisville now with their third string quarterback in, and every single one of those people was wrong. And again, like Jay said, you didn't just have your defense go out there and play well. You shut them down to only 6 points. 2 field goals was all they could put up on you. And that's why I see this Florida State team, and I think people underestimate them because this defense is better than people are wanting to give them credit for. I don't have the stat pulled up, and maybe Jay knows or can pull it up real fast for me because he's a wizard like that. But Florida State only gave up around 16 or less points per game this entire season. That is a very strong defense. That is a defense that went against some very good offenses. And so, just looking at it throughout the season, I think this Florida State team is underrated. I can't say that they would have won without Jordan Travis, and I don't think they would have won it all without Jordan Travis. But I know for a fact they're not going to go in there. One of my co-hosts, Blake Lane, he was on here yesterday, and he was talking to me, and he's even been on social media today saying that Florida State would be killed, and it'd be another one of these you get 4 teams in there, and one of them's going to get blown out. I don't think that's the case because I don't think a lot of teams can score on Florida State. If you were to have number 1 Michigan and number 4 Florida State and had it lined up that way, are you telling me that Michigan was going to hang 50 points on Florida State? Because I don't think that would be the case. Because I think I saw an LSU team go against this same defense that didn't hang 40 points, 50 points on this Florida State team. And I think that LSU offense was much better than what really any of these offenses show. And so, I look at this, I think the only offense very comparable would be Washington in that top 4. And so I do think Florida State deserves to be in that discussion. But again, that's why I go to, I think there are 6 best teams. And I also think there are 6 deserving teams to be in that playoff. And so that's why, personally, I've always been an advocate for 6 to 8. I'm okay with 8. You know why we're not talking about the 7th-ranked team right now, though? And I don't think hardly ever do we bring up the 7th-ranked team because they don't matter, and they probably don't really deserve, nor are they the best in the nation. I do think there are 6 teams that could go toe-to-toe with each other, and that's kind of where I stand on this one.
No, I get you there, and you're right. So Florida State is number 6 in the country with 15.9 points per game. So they're holding teams. They're not letting teams score them. They're not really like that, right?
Yeah.
And Florida gave Florida State hell as a rivalry. We've seen Napier do some stuff this year. He's had moments where he's done good and he's done really, really bad. So I hate the argument against Florida State. You cannibalize them immediately whenever the quarterback goes down. And that to me is not, you basically exclude, as mentioned, the defense, which this is the ultimate team game. You just exclude the entire defense and say, well, they don't matter. The quarterback's not there. It don't matter anymore. We're just going to go ahead and throw you out. And we don't know what Rudemaker is going to be able to do with more preparation as number one guy, as first snap guy. If he's getting a bunch of them, he could be a completely difference maker. Now, we'll find out now because he's going to play Georgia. And if he goes out there and he lights it up against Georgia, everybody's argument against him basically becomes null and void.
Well,
thrown out the window.
Even if that's just a close game, too. I'm not saying that FSU needs to go out there with their second string quarterback who doesn't have a lot of experience and who really isn't a great quarterback by any means. Nobody's expecting them to go out there and beat Georgia, or even if they're in the top 4 to beat Michigan, Washington, or Texas or Alabama. What we're saying is that they deserve their shot, because I would put my money on it that it would be a close game against any one of those top 4 teams, and I think that's why we have such a controversy here. And so, I think the only way the committee could have gotten it absolutely right was saying, you know what, guys, we screwed up by only making it 4 in the first place. We're opening it up to these top 6 teams because they all deserve it. But it's tough. But I mean, Vince, if you, I know you were very hardcore against the committee's decision. If you had to go and convince the committee, what would be the top 4 teams that you say these are the 4 teams that need to be in it?
That's tough. I would have gone Michigan, Washington, Alabama, Florida State. The reason why you mentioned earlier, Alabama beat the number 1 team in the nation. I think if you run it back, I think Georgia beats them. Honestly, I think Georgia is as deserving as anybody to make the playoffs.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're the best team still in the nation, in my opinion. But that being said, they lost and they deserve to be out because of that. So I would have had Alabama in over Texas. That being said, we're going to see Texas and Alabama play each other in the years to come now in the SEC. And I'm an SEC guy. I'm a Tennessee guy. So I'm okay with what's going on at the end of the day. But yeah, to me, Alabama beat the number 1 team. They deserve to be in. They're only a 1-loss team. Texas is right there nipping on the heels.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that, but I like Texas. I think Texas is entertaining. I think in that sense, I like it for the ratings and things like that. But
and it probably would have solidified their, and I think Jake could probably agree with me. It would have solidified it if we did the same ranking system and had the 2 best teams of the Big 12 playing against each other. It would have probably solidified Texas if they would have beat Oklahoma on their second time around. So I mean, I look at that and I get it, and I'm not on the side with the Oklahoma fans that are saying, we had more wins and therefore the head-to-head matchup doesn't matter. I think head-to-head matchup does matter. That's why I have a hard time leaving Texas out. And so, then that whole debate starts. And so, I think when you walked into Tuscaloosa and didn't just beat Alabama, speaking about Texas, beating Alabama, you walked in there and owned them the entire game. You shut Jalen Milroe down. I think you also see an Alabama team, though, and kind of to your point, Vince, you see an Alabama team that's not the same team. They didn't have a QB the way that they do right now. Because Jalen Milroe has progressed and matured a lot as a quarterback, and Jalen Milroe has looked a lot better as he's gone throughout the season. Coming from being benched, what was that? Was that the USF game?
USF game?
Yeah, and even though if you're Tommy Rees, if you're Nick Saban, the way that game turned into with a hurricane going through, basically, you would have rather Jalen Milroe in there and run some read option, keep the ball on the ground the whole time, but that's not the way that one went. But since being benched in that game, you've seen him progress and make better decisions. And on top of that, a huge shout out to Tommy Rees and the entire offensive staff for whoever it is that's in charge. Maybe it was Nick Saban stepping in and saying, hey, this needs to change, because I think they also changed that offensive scheme to fit Jalen Milroe rather than trying to make Jalen Milroe fit their scheme. And that was an incredible thing. And we were talking about that in the first 4 or 5 games for for Alabama, was that, it just doesn't feel right. You're not putting him in the right position to win games. And so I really like that they changed that up for Jalen Milroe and put him in the system that's actually going to fit his play style too.
No, I agree with you there. I think that Bama's going to go out there. They have gotten better as the years progress. Their defense is what's gotten better. They're playing a lot of young players. I mean, you got Cade Proctor on the offensive line. He's a freshman. You got Caleb Downs playing one of the most important roles in the Nick Saban defense, a strong safety. He's a freshman. And so you started to see at the beginning of the season, they were baiting the heck out of him. Downs was really getting pulled into places he shouldn't be going to. And then as he got more experience, he settled down and started to know when the traps were in there and when he should do the commit and when he should go after stuff. And so he looked like a completely different person. And so I anticipate that Bama's going to probably be a pain in Michigan's side in that game. But Michigan does a really good job of keeping the game slow and slowing things down a lot. And as long as Bama's going to have to stop them from running the ball and stop them from slowing things. They're going to have to force J.J. McCarthy to beat them. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. That's going to be really hard to do at Michigan in the way they play ball.
Yeah, and what's crazy too, when you compare Michigan and Georgia, that those are two very comparable teams. Because you take a look at Georgia, I think Georgia, they don't have the running back duo that Michigan has, but I don't think Michigan has the wide receiver core that Georgia has, and that's kind of the difference maker between, because then you look at Carson Beck and J.J. McCarthy. I think other than stats, if you just take stats out and just watch the two play, I think they're very comparable in their playing style and their decision-making, and then also how much they've both matured stepping into this role that they've been thrown into this year too. So I feel like it's going to be a very similar match, I think, between Alabama and Michigan as what we saw. But did you guys happen to see the reaction from Michigan when they saw that, oh, man, we're going to have to go against Alabama? We were thinking we got Florida State. Come on.
Yeah.
So
that's an Nick Saban effect.
Yeah, I think that was finally the deciding factor for me, that, you know what, maybe they did get it right because you completely demoralized that locker room with Michigan. Like 4 guys were like, no, we're okay with this, right? The rest of them are like, I guess, yeah, we're going to pretend like we're excited, but we got to go against Bama.
Yeah, the early thought is, I'll take Alabama over Michigan. As a fan of football, okay, and again, I'm a Tennessee fan and an Eastern Kentucky fan. Eastern Kentucky will never be at this spot, so we don't have to worry about that. Tennessee, would love to see them back in this spot, and maybe once we get to the expanded playoffs, they will be in that area. But I like to see variety. I don't want to see the same teams every year. I got tired of Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia. For me, seeing Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Florida State would have been ideal with my team not being in there, just because it's new, it's fresh. Yeah. That being said, I'm not going to bet against Saban. I'll take him over Jim Harbaugh. And I think what Alabama can do with the experience on that staff, not to say that Michigan doesn't have any experience on the staff, but I'll take Alabama. I would assume the line is going to be in the 2.5 range, maybe. I don't know, but I'll take Alabama to beat Michigan.
Yeah, and looking at it too, thinking about Alabama, I guess with that much time though, does Michigan have enough time to go over and steal some of those signs too and kind of figure all that stuff out? But no, overall, I look at Alabama, and I think Alabama is much like what I would say Florida State was this year. Is they got into some of those battles with USF, and they got into a battle with Auburn, and there was a couple others where they just didn't really perform. Arkansas was another one. They didn't perform against teams that they should have whooped up on, but they just find ways to win, and it's the same thing whenever they went against Georgia. And so seeing that, and also I guess a little bit of a shout out to Texas, support. I'm supporting Texas. I was even throwing horns up on our show, which just shows you how badly I was really wanting them to win for outside reasons, outside of the rivalry. But just seeing that, Jay, I'm sure you saw and heard all the booing and the SEC chants from whenever the Big 12 commissioner gets up on the stand to make his little speech. But yeah, I love that Texas got in. And they didn't leave Texas out and put Alabama in, because then I think there would have been even more uproar. But then it's just also hard to leave. I think out of Florida State and Georgia, I think it's harder to leave Georgia out because they're the 2-time reigning national champs and came within a field goal to Alabama, who you're also throwing in there. But man, I think this playoffs, like you said, Vince, I think with having Washington and Texas in there, and then Alabama down at a number 4 seed. I don't know if that has ever happened, has it? With Alabama down at a 4 seed?
Was there once where they lost to Georgia in the SEC? But that may have been the 3 seed then.
Yeah, I think they got in as a 3 seed then. And so yeah, that's something I didn't really think about until just now. But it's kind of weird seeing Alabama ranked on the bottom of any team, let alone being Texas. Who I do think is back, and Washington, who I was picking against them. I thought they would cover the spread but still lose to Oregon, because you take that first matchup against Oregon, and Oregon was the better team. I think Oregon won that game if Dan Lanning makes the right decisions and doesn't try to go for it on fourth down before the half and kind of miss out on 2 different field goal opportunities. And then on top of that, go for it again at midfield, giving Washington a much better field to work with to come back to go into, to lead that game the first go around. So the fact that it was really some key coaching decisions and key decisions there on fourth down that I thought won the game for Washington the first time, and kind of bad coaching decisions on the other sideline is what won it for Washington. That's why I was picking Washington to lose that game. And so the fact that they were able to battle through, their defense was absolutely astounding and very relentless. And they were the aggressors in that game, and I think that's why they won. And then also just the pure fact that game hit the under just shows you how tough Washington really is, and how tough that defense was really wanting to go out there and win that game. And so I think they put the nation on notice too.
Yeah, I can see that. And Alabama was number 4 seed in 2017 when they played against Clemson. Oklahoma played Georgia at the Rose Bowl, so it's Sugar Rose Bowl, similar setup as this, and they were number 4. And guess what? They won the championship.
Yep, they sure did. Well,
because they lost, I think, it's going to be an interesting setup.
I'm just feeling it already. Alabama's going to beat Michigan. It's going to be Michigan, Texas. It's going to be a rematch, and it's going to be round 3. Who's going to take home, because Alabama won barely last year. Texas whooped up on them this year. Now you're going to have round 3. Who's going to take that pride home with them this season? And even better yet,
in Houston too.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. How about that? If they were to walk into Houston, so you're going to go to each other's territory and beat each other in each other's territory 3 times in a row. So I mean, that would be absolutely insane. But I'm just feeling it already. It's going to be Alabama to win it all, even though everyone says Florida State deserved to be an over top of them, or however they want to mix it up. But I'm already feeling it, man. It's going to be an exciting one.
And what I'm seeing is Michigan opens up at 1.5 point favorites. Texas is a 4-point favorite opening up against Washington.
Yeah, that one kind of shocked me a little bit, seeing Washington as an underdog to Texas. I feel like it's going to be a really good matchup. But the thing that I keep on telling everybody is, I think Vegas either they either know more than we do and they're very smart, or they're very smart at tricking you into betting the opposite way because they make you overthink. Like how I think they started to do with that FSU Louisville game. I think they made a lot of people overthink and start to second guess on their betting.
I think it's more so proximity is the reason why Texas is that high of a favorite. They're playing the Sugar Bowl in Louisiana, which is up the street around the corner in comparison to Washington, traveling across the country to that game.
Does make sense.
It's going to be a lot more Texas fans in the audience than will be Washington fans, unless Washington travels. I've not seen how Washington travels, to be absolutely honest. But I do recall, what was that, last year when Washington and Texas played each other in the bowl game. Washington won the game 27-20.
Yeah.
And they looked really good in that game. And then now they've come out here and won 13 straight games, So
I think
that's going to be a good one. Yeah, I think they do look Penix looks way better this year than he did last. He's making better decisions, and he's doing it in a very clutch way. So it's going to be a very interesting game. Texas has an opportunity to make a statement too. They really need to make a statement in this game. But I think Washington is going to be a lot harder out than people think. 4.5 is a lot lower than it probably could have been. But like I said, proximity, I think, is what's giving Texas those extra 2 points.
Well, and to speak on Michael Penix too, I think watching him, so he doesn't run the ball really at all this season. He's negative on rushing yards. And so just seeing that's how good he is. He doesn't even have to run. Where you look at guys like Bo Nix or Jalen Daniels, or even looking at Jalen Milroe, pretty much any quarterback around the nation. It's a game. College football is a game where you need a dual threat quarterback now, and he's doing it without his legs. But you take a look at him in that Pac-12 championship game. What happened when they needed the ball on the ground and they were still trusting in Michael Penix? He put the ball on the ground and still ran it. And I think he's really smart for not running, because he's had a lot of injuries in the past where if he gets banged up too much, he's possibly putting himself out of a career. But Vince, did you have something there?
Well, yeah, you said it earlier that you think Texas is back, and I agree 100% with you. And I think from what we've seen out of Texas, these last 2 games from Texas, especially the amount of points that they're putting up, Penix and Ewers, I think, are pretty close as far as if you had to put in one against the other, which we're going to do. I mean, I think they're almost a wash. I especially with being closer to home. Not to say Washington can't travel, but I promise you, there's going to be a much larger Texas fan base there. And honestly, even weather plays a little bit of a role. Texas is going to be a little bit more used to the warmer weather than Washington playing a little colder weather. So, I mean, big difference. No. That being said, I mean, I think you're right. Alabama Texas rematch, I think, is what we're headed towards.
Yeah, I think it will be, and I'm not going to count Washington out yet. I think it's going to take some time for me to make my official pick on that game, just because I'm already seeing the battle in my head, trying to wrap my brain around who could actually win that game. So I can already see myself doubting myself in either way that I pick that game. So it's going to be a fun one. I think the committee did get it right when you talk about the 4 best teams and what they showed on the field. But then at the same time, Vince, I agree with you. I think that it's hard to leave Florida State out, and that's why it almost feels like it's wrong. And that's the thing. I think every year, that's why I'm glad it's opening up to 12, because then nobody can argue that somebody didn't get in, even though somebody's going to argue that they should have been put in over another. There's always going to be that debate. But like I said, I think going back throughout the years, outside of one year that I can think of when I think there was a little bit of a debate with TCU and Baylor in the Big 12, and I think one of them was ranked number 7, I think, in that situation, if I remember right. But I think that's the only time I can think of a 7th team possibly being deserving, or one of those teams that you're looking at thinking maybe they should get in to the top 4 as well. But I just feel like you've got to open it up to 6. I would say 8 is my max, but regardless, we're going to be opening it up to 12 next year. So I do think adding more games, and especially that they're going to be home games for certain teams that get the higher seeding and all of that, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch with more football. I'm not ever going to complain about more football. So as a fan, I'm all for it. But also as a fan of true championships, I'm all against it at the same time. So it's going to be fun regardless. But guys, I thank you guys both for hopping on with me. Vince, I'll start off with you. Tell everybody where we can find your stuff.
Yeah, so the Sports Stove podcast, right now we're live twice a week, Monday nights at 8 and Wednesday nights at 8 Eastern time. Monday nights is my local hour, so it's covering Eastern Kentucky University. We have student athletes on. Basketball right now is what our focus is, and coaches and things like that on too. Wednesday nights, my dad joins me, and we just talk all things sports. And so I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Sports Stove. The Sports Stove podcast is on every possible audio version of podcasts, and then the YouTube channel is the Sports Stove podcast as well.
Awesome. Well, Vince, thank you for jumping on. And also, Jay, tell everybody where they can find your stuff too.
Yeah, you can find me here on YouTube, Unfair Sports, as well as wherever podcasts are downloaded and listened to. Talking, OU football and college football in general all the time. And Josh, thanks for having me as usual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm Josh Mahler. I'm host of Rising to the Occasion. You can find us also on YouTube and pretty much anywhere where you find your podcasts. That is just Rising to the Occasion. You should be able to find us just fine. But everyone who did tune in to watch with us and kind of jump in with their reactions to this playoff selection also, we thank you so much. But if you've reached this far into the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Help Belly Up Sports grow a little bit here on YouTube. And you can also hit that like button. That helps us a lot against the algorithms. And if you didn't catch us live and you're catching this after the fact, which is very possible, you can comment down below. That also helps us. And you can also go over to bellyupsports.com to find everything that we do here at Belly Up Sports. Again, to you guys, thank you so much for joining me, and everyone watching, thanks for joining us.